Good evening. Welcome to the Capital Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance reporting to you from Seoul, South Korea. For decades, the West has held on to a hope that by aiding China's economic development, China would naturally transition toward democracy, embrace human rights, and even reverse the longstanding suppression of its people. But has our assistance and investment in China actually helped the Chinese people? Or have we unwittingly allowed China's communist rule to flourish? We're here at Seoul National University, South Korea's most esteemed educational institution. Surprisingly, there exists a library here named the Xi Jinping Library, the leader of the Chinese Communist regime. This surreal presence at one of our allies' top universities raises a critical question. How deeply has the specter of communism permeated the free world? Tonight, we're kicking off our special edition right here on this campus, sitting down with PhD student David Kim. He's also the president of Truth Forum, a Korean-based think tank. He'll be breaking down for us the CCP's malign influence on South Korea's most respected institution. David Kim, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
David, I want to get your thoughts about the United Front and the Chinese Communist Party's efforts in South Korea to utilize this. What can you tell us about their efforts?
It's very active and widespread. And the problem is that people in South Korea realizes it, but the problem is that from the politics, there is not that much voice coming out from there. In Canada, in Australia, New Zealand, and in the United States, there are voices warning the dangers of United Front tactics of CCP from the politics. But in South Korea, the problem is that not even a single politician is active in dealing with this United Front tactics of China.
So the Confucius Institute at your university, where you've done a lot of work for human rights, the Seoul National University, tell us about what they have, some of the efforts that they have made on Korean soil.
Inside university, Seoul National University, we do not have Confucius Institute, but we have a Xi Jinping Library in the Central Library of Seoul National University. It's a special section. It's kind of around this size of this room with the books donated by Xi Jinping. We get the books around 2014. It's the time when Xi Jinping officially visited Korea and visited Seoul National University. Around that time, we welcomed him because we expected a different China, China with universal values, supporting universal values, but he's going backward. Xi Jinping Library in the university, in Seoul National University, is nothing but just demonstrating and advertising CCP. So that's the reason why me and my friends start to speak up to shut it down, because China is definitely going against those kind of fundamental values, freedom, liberty, and human rights.
What do you think the purpose is of this library?
It was planned by the suggestion of Xi Jinping in 2014 when he visited this university. We accepted it because, as I mentioned, we expected different China. But now he's become a dictator, lifelong dictator. And if we keep having this special section, special library for Xi Jinping, in a way we are supporting him and supporting his inhumane activities toward North Korean refugees. So we need to shut it down. The university office made the decision to keep it because they kind of worried about this kind of diplomatic relationship with China. But there are lots of voices coming out from university that having the library in university is just supporting what he's doing now. So we need to shut it down. Thankfully, the voices are coming out from universities.
So one of the reasons why we're here in Seoul is because a New York-based dance company, Shenyun Performing Arts, has been interfered with flatly by the Chinese Communist Party's various organs and United Front and different apparatuses, if you will, to influence South Korean theaters from not allowing them to perform. What do you think when you hear something like this?
I feel sorry about that. By the way, I was invited to the show, and I was very much impressed. I heard that some theaters in South Korea, after they made contact with the group, and later on they canceled it because of the influence by Chinese government. That can happen because they don't want to lose relationship or opportunity with China. So I feel very sorry about what is happening, but now is the time to reveal it. We should let people know what is happening and their influence, even though it's kind of it's a struggle. But I think this struggle is to reveal the reality and nature of the Chinese Communist Party.
What would your message be to your fellow countrymen in South Korea as this all plays out?
I think our foundation, I believe, is truth. And we are fighting against lies based on the truth. Those kind of cultural Marxism have their own hypothesis, and which is, I think, wrong. So when people realize the reality and the truth, I think they will be changed. And that is my belief, and that is why I'm speaking up.
David Kim, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
From local theaters to the National Assembly here in South Korea, the specter of communism appears to be reaching every sphere of society. How is this ideological shift even taking place? And why should freedom-loving people around the world be concerned? NTD's congressional correspondent Melina Wisecup spoke with Suzanne Schult, president of Defense Forum Foundation, to find out.
Joining me now is Suzanne Schult, who is the president of Defense Forum Foundation. Thank you so much for your time.
Good to be here.
So I want to talk with you about your organization specifically. Part of what they do is they inform policymakers of defense issues, not only in America, but also our allied nations. So I want to ask you about the extent of the CCP's infiltration, and if you could, specifically in South Korea.
Well, I think it's really important for your audience to know that South Korea almost elected a communist in the last election. Last year in March, it was the closest election in South Korean presidential history between Yoon Suk-yeol, who won, and Lee Jae-myung, who was a Democratic candidate. But he's not a Democratic candidate in the classic sense of being a Democrat. He is a pro-communist candidate, and he almost won. As far as the growth of the communist threat in America is pretty strong as well. But I think people need to understand a liberal democracy like South Korea almost elected a pro-communist candidate in the last election.
Specifically, one of the messages that Shenyun portrays is people coming out of that religious and spiritual suppression, sort of a message of hope in the face of tyranny. So with that being said, why do you think it's so important for democratic countries like South Korea to be preserving the freedom of expression, especially in the arts?
In South Korea, I was horrified to learn about the problem. This is a performance that they were trying to show to people in South Korea that celebrates Chinese culture. And I think it's absolutely vitally important. That's just one aspect. It's one of our most important freedom is freedom of expression, freedom of religion. It's the most important freedom. I think that's why the Founding Fathers made it number one, because that is the most important thing. Freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. And when you see a suppression for somebody not to be able to put on a performance, that is the fundamental human right. It's the number one most important thing.
So does it surprise you that Korean theaters have turned down a world-class performing arts company like Shenyun?
Yes, I was shocked. Frankly, I was shocked. But I think that this is an illustration of how bad things are in South Korea. And we do have a president, President Yoon, and the international community and those that love and embrace freedom need to do everything they can to help President Yoon, because President Yoon has been speaking out boldly about freedom and human rights. But we have to understand that he is facing a divided country. The Korean National Assembly is controlled by the pro-communists in South Korea. And the Democratic Party there is a pro-communist party. And they passed, just to give you an example, and because it goes right to the point you're making about freedom of expression, the South Korean Assembly passed legislation several years ago that banned leafleting, that banned balloon launches, that banned the sharing of information across the border into North Korea. Why did they do that? Because the Kim Jong-un regime demanded that the South Korean government turn off the loudspeakers at the DMZ and also stop the flow of information across the border, which was being done by North Korean defectors. So in a way, it's shocking that this is happening in South Korea, but when we understand the environment there.
Well, I want to ask you then, what are some solutions? Because it seems like there needs to be a big change within that assembly if they are to actually make changes to try to, opposing this infiltration by the CCP. So what do you think that Korean people should do, or even high or low level government officials? How should they address this issue?
Well, we need to speak out on these issues. I think what you're doing on this performance and highlighting the fact that this is happening in South Korea, we need to speak out about this. South Korea is a very one of our most important allies in Asia, and so we need to be speaking out. The international community needs to be speaking out this to uphold the rights of the citizens of South Korea, but also remember we need to focus on the fact that there is an election coming up in April that's going to determine how much Yoon is able to do to advance freedom. So we need to really focus attention on that and call on our South Korean friends that care about freedom and human rights to really pay attention to this election, because it's going to be critical for the future of the Republic of Korea.
So how would you explain to Americans the heart of the Korean people that you speak with in regards to how they view morals and how they may or may not view this art show?
I think it's very much what's happening in America, that you have a division between people that are actually engaged in, you have a pro-freedom and a pro-communist, and that's happening all over the world right now. Which future do you want? You want a dark place like the North Korea? Because the Korean Peninsula is a beautiful illustration of the difference between what it's like to live under communism and what it's like to live under a republic. So I think just making sure that we're speaking out about these things and calling attention to them as you're doing, but just realizing that we have to reach the younger people in South Korea, because I think that's where the divide is. I think there's a lot of misinformed, misled young people, just like in our country, that need to be awakened to the truth.
The truth of what specifically? Could you speak to the difference in the values between the Chinese Communist Party, the North Korean regime, and that of freedom and democracy that they may not be able to see through?
Yeah, well, I think that there's this ignorance about what communism is. And it's basically a soul-sucking destruction of the human spirit and bringing people into a terrible darkness. The South Korean ruling party signed an agreement with the Chinese Communist Party. National Assembly has exhibited a bust of Mao Zedong, calling him a savior. Confucius Institutes in South Korea promote Chinese Communist Party's propaganda. Seoul, Busan cities celebrate the founding of China, but not the foundation of South Korea's armed forces. So we have got to hit these things head on, and we've got to speak the truth, and we've got to reach out to our young people to give them a very clear understanding of what communism is.
Thank you, Suzanne, for your time.
Sure thing.
Just how entangled is the CCP in South Korea's domestic affairs? And what is enabling this malign influence? To discuss, we sat down with Jeong Lee. She's a professor of Chinese studies at Keimyung University.
Dr. Jeong Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to meet you. My pleasure.
It's great to have you, Doctor. How big is the CCP's footprint here in South Korea, and what mechanisms and channels and things do they use to try to achieve their objectives?
During the last 40 years and 30 years, the CCP has invested a bunch of political asset and economic investment and cultural investment as well to South Korean society. So the CCP has succeeded in entangling Korean society in China's money. And China's the influential power in Korean society is widespread and powerful, from the central government and the official government officials of the central government and the local government and university, companies, and local society. So China wields its influential power to Korean society.
I think a prime example of this is the New York-based Shenyun Performing Arts Troupe, who has tried tirelessly to perform in South Korea, successfully sometimes, but overall they've been blocked.
Yes, the Shenyun case is the clear one, how deeply and powerfully the CCP wielded its influential power to Korean society. The Korean society and from the central government to the local government and university, almost all these institutes objected to have Shenyun Orchestra run its performance on a Korean theater. Korean society is a freedom society, so everyone can have right to run its orchestra, its performance in Korean theater. It exhibits a clear example how deeply and powerfully the CCP wields its influential power.
Shenyun performs in over 20 countries around the world, hundreds of cities, and we know from our investigative reporting and reports that it's not just South Korea that gets pressured. Theaters in the U.S. have gotten dossiers from the Chinese embassy to defame Shenyun. In Taiwan, which is in a similar geographical location to China as South Korea, has had similar things. But it seems like the CCP has been more effective in South Korea at achieving their goals. Why?
The CCP has invested its political asset and economic interests in every corner of Korean society, from the government, central government to the local government and university. It invested its economic asset and political asset. So no one gives the clear pressure to staff or individual staff of university or government official of the central government and local government. No one. And the power runs every sphere of Korean society. It's reality, unfortunately.
You're a professor.
Yeah, I'm a professor.
Tell us about the Confucius Institute.
Many universities runs the Confucius Institute. And the CCP provides many benefits with the Korean universities. And the Korean universities that runs the Confucius Institute have strong economic interests in China.
So where is the crossroads of Korea maintaining its sovereignty and its democratic values at the same time for people to still maintain their economic prosperity? Where is that crossroads?
Most Koreans strongly want to keep its principle of freedom and its political base of free democracy. The problem is Korean elite, politicians, journalists, professors, university, and company, they have strong economic interests in China's money.
At the end of the day, it's the Korean people who will ultimately lose to the behest of the CCP. So, if the Korean people find out about these relationships and policies that have led to this situation, how do you think they'll ultimately feel?
Korean public need to realize what's going on in Korean society in terms of the CCP's mainline political work and political propaganda. So we need to make publicize of the CCP's mainline political works and political propaganda. It should be the first task. It should be the first task. And then if many Koreans realize the reality of the CCP, the Korean public will move to protect its value and its society from the CCP, I believe.
Dr. Jeong Lee, thank you.
Thank you.
As we wrap up our special coverage from South Korea, our mission to uncover the truth about the CCP carries on. Earlier today, we had a very rare conversation with an official from the Chinese embassy in Seoul, who indeed confirmed the CCP will continue to misinform the Korean government about Shenyun Performing Arts. That discussion was recorded, and we'll have those details in the coming days. Stay tuned for our upcoming documentary later this month on NTD, where we'll be shedding even more light on the censorship and interference on the US-based Shenyun Performing Arts in South Korea. In the meantime, that's all we have for you on the Capitol Report. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.